Strong emotions are known to cloud judgment, and they can sometimes lead to us making choices we would not ordinarily make. These strong feelings allow some of us to trust a manipulative significant other, or equally, they can make an otherwise peaceful person turn to unspeakable acts of violence. Such incidents have happened throughout all of human history. So I bring you 5 cases from around the world of people who have given in to their moments of passion and committed horrific acts.
Oh, God.
The 1915 murder of Barbara Cornelius was recently brought to public attention again when in 2018, a graphic artist named Frederick Dury took the time to add colour to old New York City crime scene photos, including the ones taken of 25-year-old Barbara lying in her bed next to the man who shot her, George McGovern. While the exact details leading up to the event are unknown, it is known that the assailant entered the bedroom of Mrs. Cornelius' third-floor Brooklyn apartment on Thomas S. Borland Street on June 17, 1915, at roughly 1:30 in the morning, and it is believed that after a struggle, Barbara was shot in the stomach and then in the temple. George McCone then lay down next to her and shot himself in the head, using the revolver he was required to carry for his job at the Pennsylvania Railroad. Barbara's husband, Calvin Cornelius, did not recognize the man, and so it was initially believed to be a robbery gone wrong. However, postcards from George to Barbara were found in her personal chest, in which George referred to her by her nickname Bessie, suggesting they were familiar with one another. It was unknown whether or not they were having an affair, but it was surmised that George was an admirer turned stalker, upset at her recent marriage to Carmen Cornelius. On February 14, 2005, a man by the name of Paul Dyson reported his fiancée, Joanne Nelson, missing. He said that they had exchanged Valentine's Day cards earlier that morning before he kissed her goodbye and left for work while she was still in bed at their home at 94 Hotham Road North, in the English city of Hull in East Yorkshire. However, Joanne never showed up for work that day. Paul later made a 999 call to the police in the presence of Joanne's parents.
Hello there, fiance, I don't know what she is. I was trying to report somebody missing. What's the name, please? It's John Nelson, John G. Nelson. I'm sure she's into work and that, but we should have cars outside of the road, and the doors were locked. I've been trying to get hold of her on the phone since I've got here, there's no answer. Nobody seems to know either way or that. Okay, well, further in the street, no doors are locked. Yeah. In red. There's only no registration. It's not there with you? I'm not about to it. Is there any arguments or anything else you need to know? No, nothing like that. It's just completely out of reality from her.
On February the 16th, Paul appeared on the BBC News programme Look North, sobbing, begging for her return, and mourning along with her family. However, during the television interview, crescent-shaped wounds were noticed on his hands. Police believe that these were similar to defensive marks left on an assailant when a victim tries to stop a strangulation. Later, Paul admitted to a friend that he had killed 22-year-old Joanne on the weekend of February the 12th and 13th. That friend told Paul's mother, who then turned her son into the police. When confronted with the information, he broke down and admitted to killing Joanne, but insisted it was unintentional. Paul Dyson had left school at 16 and had spent much of his adult life working low-paying jobs, and in his free time honed his physique as a bodybuilder. He had divorced previously, had a 5-year-old daughter, and was now struggling to pay child maintenance. His former wife, during an interview in 2005, said that Dyson had been a violent husband and had even attacked her on their wedding night in 1999. In contrast, Joanne was 10 years younger than him, and her promising professional life had just begun to take off. They dated and eventually moved in together after meeting at a job centre where Joanne worked. The couple had planned to marry in Mexico in 2006, and Joanne was said to have been excited about the prospect. But Paul told police that he and Joanne had argued over domestic chores on the day of her death, which led to threats of ending the relationship. He said that's when he lost his temper and strangled his slightly built fiancée. Following the incident, he set out his plans to dispose of the body and to evade capture. CCTV footage from a local shop showed Paul purchasing refuse bags, tape and disinfectant. He also drove to his mother's house to borrow a garden fork before returning to his home. It was later found that he had used these purchased items to clean the crime scene and get rid of evidence. After sealing her body in the bags and wrapping it in clear tape, he loaded Joanne into her own car. He stopped for fuel 30 miles from their home in the town of Howden and then headed north, driving another 40 miles to an isolated woodland area of North Yorkshire. When caught and questioned 7 days after Joanne's death, he claimed that he couldn't remember where he left her body. After hours of questioning, all the police had to go by was a very vague account by Dyson as to Joanne's whereabouts. He described a metal gate close to farm buildings in woodland. Based on Dyson's description, an artist's impression of the area was made, and ultimately, this was all the police had to go on. What followed was the biggest search operation Humberside police had ever undertaken, and miles of land were searched to no avail. Police then turned to forensic expert Patricia Wiltshire. Based on the clothing Paul Dyson wore on the day of Joanne's disposal, she was able to form a much clearer picture. She found that Paul's clothing had pollen spores and microscopic particles of certain plants only found in very specific areas of the county, most predominantly western hemlock and birch tree. This narrowed the search significantly, but in the end it was a chance discovery by the man leading the investigation that led to the discovery of Joanne Nelson. On March the 24th, 2005, Detective Superintendent Ray Higgins drove the Yorkshire countryside in an earnest attempt at finding Joanne. As he passed through the village of Bransbury, he passed a gate he thought looked like the one described by Paul Dyson weeks earlier. He stopped the car, walked through the gate, and on investigation, found a fallen tree 300 yards from the road. Beneath that tree was a large bundle, covered in black bags and wrapped in clear tape. Joanne's body had finally been found, 6 weeks after her death. Detective Higgins said it was the most spectacular find of his career. Paul Dyson changed his original plea of manslaughter to murder on the first day of the trial and was sentenced to life in prison in November of 2005. On May the 3rd, 2018, engaged couple Stefanus, 25, and Laura, 41, of central Jakarta in Indonesia, had a fatal argument. Earlier that day, the couple had posed for pre-wedding photos for their planned wedding in August. However, that night, an argument ensued at Laura's home in the district of Gambir. Laura, who had graduated from an Australian university, had complained that her family were paying for the entire wedding, whilst Stefanus was contributing nothing. Feeling humiliated, the struggling taxi driver began to argue with Laura. He claims that she then pulled out a knife and threatened him, so he wrestled it away before stabbing her several times in the abdomen. In a panic, he wrapped her body in a pink bed cover, hid her in the back of his car, and then drove to his home in Pekojan, Tambora. He then contacted 4 of his friends, and together they conspired to keep her body in his car for a day, before heading to a beach near Serang, west of Jakarta. Stephanus, along with his friends, burnt Laura's body on the water's edge. Stephanus was arrested at his home at 5 a.m. on May the 5th, 2018, by the Tambora Police Resort Criminal Investigation Team. He pled provocation and said that Laura often humiliated him. In June of 1993, the world became captivated with the story of a young woman named Lorena Bobbitt, who was on trial for removing her husband's penis with a kitchen knife after she claimed he raped her. Over 20 years later, a similar situation will occur with another married couple halfway around the world, although the circumstances surrounding this case would be very different. In 2015, a married man from China by the name of Fan Lung learnt a hard lesson when he failed to cover his tracks well enough to hide the fact that he had a mistress. In fact, he even used his wife's phone to send his secret lover a graphic email. Following this brazen act, his wife soon found the email on her phone. She became infuriated and taken over by anger. She grabbed a pair of scissors and castrated her unfaithful husband while he slept. Amazingly enough, authorities intervened in time to get him to the hospital and reattach his penis. It was thought that he would make a full recovery. However, still furious, his wife managed to sneak into the hospital and remove it again, this time throwing it out of a window. Hospital staff were alerted to the incident when he chased her out of the building, where a fight between the two ensued. The castrated man was in shock and losing a lot of blood, but staff didn't notice the lost appendage until they'd managed to separate the couple. They tried in vain to look for the lost body part, but it was not found, and they concluded that a stray dog or cat may have found it first. As for his mistress, Sang Hung, she shrugged off the loss and casually said that he already had 5 children, so he didn't need any more. She also said that she intended to marry him as soon as possible. Mr. Lung's scorned wife, Feng Lung, was arrested and charged with grievous bodily harm. This incident shouldn't be confused with a similar case of Chinese couple Lin and Zia from 2009. On September 27, 1977, a quiet afternoon at the University of Dhaka, Bangladesh, was disturbed by the screams of a geology student by the name of Birendra Kumar Sarkar. When other students went to investigate, they found him lying in a pool of blood. He had been stabbed several times. Before finally succumbing to his injuries at the Dhaka Medical College Hospital, he told his fellow students and staff that he had been stabbed by his friend, science student Ranjit Kumar Majumdar. It soon transpired that the accused killer, Ranjit, had become jealous when he found out that Virendra was romantically involved with a woman by the name of Shikha Rani, a fellow student Ranjit had previously had a relationship with. Amazingly, it would take 11 years for the case to go to trial. In that time, Ranjit would flee the country to India, so he was tried in his absence. Witnesses have also disappeared over the years, some of them moving to the United States. There was a trial as recently as November of 2017, meaning this case is still technically open and unresolved 40 years later, making it one of the oldest unresolved cases in Bangladesh. A former ward boy at the university recalled the incident for the Dhaka Tribune in 2018. He said, "Nobody saw the murder take place. We were on duty, but went back to our quarters for lunch. Someone informed us that there had been a murder on the second floor. When I arrived at the hall, I saw the students taking Virendra to the hospital." I'd like to thank someone at this point.
And now, ABC's 2020.
I think I might get copyrighted for that one. Oh shit, this is a whole movie. Oh Lord.
This is the story of an island paradise. A paradise with a dark side.
As much of a beautiful place that it is, don't be fools, don't be tricked.
The story of mysterious deaths and conspiracy theories.
The way that police treated us was disgraceful. I think that they just try and cover these things up.
The murders of two British backpackers.
It was a very scary time when we tried to piece together what had happened.
A police force under fire.
He alleges that he was sexually assaulted, abused, beaten, threatened.
Threats from the local mafia.
They control people coming and going, they control money, they know when an outsider is coming in.
And trial by internet. This is the inside story of Murder in Paradise. Kingstown is a haven for young backpackers. An isolated island, 250 miles from the Thai capital Bangkok, only accessible by boat. More than 500,000 travellers come here every year, drawn to the beaches, nightlife, and hedonism. Jack Van Toor lived in Thailand for 3 years on 2 of the islands.
It's magical when you first arrive. Everything is perfect, and because the contrast between like the way you were kind of policed in Europe and everything's controlled, when you arrive in Thailand, you feel like you can do what you like.
After 3 months travelling across Southeast Asia, Annabelle, Emma, and Holly have just arrived.
We didn't do much research into Koh-Tao, did we? Yeah, most travelers is one of my favourite. Yeah, most people have said it was their favourite island in Thailand. So we've obviously, allocated a lot more time to this island. Yeah, and we're going to book extra nights here than we first thought because we love it so much.
This episode kind of sucked.
Bill and Melanie McGuire were headed towards his death.
This one's 40.
18-year-old Khadidra Cook gives up everything to play house with a young rebel.
Khadidra was brainwashed by them. She just didn't care what people thought about him. She was still going to be with him regardless.
But when family and police threaten to break them up, Khadidra is forced out of her fantasy world into a brutal reality.
She was stabbed probably about 40 to 50 times all over her body. She went along with it because that was her man.
And later, in Grand Prairie, Texas, 26-year-old single mother Desiree Satterwhite falls for a man who's long in the tooth with a rap sheet to match.
Charles convinced her that together they could conquer the world.
But when times get tough,
I can't keep looking like this.
Charles recruits Desiree as his partner in crime.
But they were focusing on convenience stores, places that they could run in and run out very quickly.
She wanted to please him, even if it meant putting her life and the lives of others in danger. Oh, okay.
There are hundreds of thousands of women in prison at any given time in the U.S. These are the true stories of women who committed heinous crimes in the name of love. For my man. In Marietta, Georgia, life for Khadidra Cook takes a turn for the better when, at the age of 4, she and her sister move in with their dad after their parents divorced in the wake of a rocky relationship.
Very close to her dad because
Pretty much he was there for us. He done everything with us. He made sure we went to school every day and made sure we kept our grades up.
At a very young age, the only stability that Deidre had was provided for her by a man.
But their sweet life with the perfect parent comes to a tragic end 4 years later, when an aneurysm takes the life of Khadidra's father.
It happened very suddenly. It was not something they were prepared for.
It's a stunning blow to the two young girls. Now, with their father gone and their mother long out of the picture, Khadidra and Jessica are practically orphans. At the ages of 8 and 11, they move in with an aunt on their father's side in Cedartown, some 40 miles away.
Moving with our aunt was going to be, hard because we barely know her, so we just felt like we was going to go live with a stranger pretty much.
A stranger who can now collect their father's Social Security benefit checks until Khadidra and Jessica are of legal age.
Their father was very caring, very loving. The aunt was a little different, so she knew that she could get that Social Security check and provide some stability for them. So the stability was really strict rules and not allowing them to do really much of anything.
Khadidra goes from being the center of attention from her father to now being in a crowded home, taking up space, and she's there just for a check. So not only does this become a hardship for her, but it also keeps her from getting over the absence of her father.
No longer a recipient of the love and attention she was raised with, by the age of 17, Khadidra grows into a troubled young lady.
She kind of lost her drive, her focus. She started smoking cigarettes and drinking, not really being a participant in much of anything, kind of rebelling against everything.
As Khadidra's 18th birthday nears, a light at the end of the tunnel presents itself when her older sister Jessica, now a single mother of twins, asks her to move in with her.
I was like, I don't really care too much what you do as long as you don't get in trouble and you stay in school. And she agreed with it. She said, okay. And so I ended up getting a 3-bedroom with me, her, and my daughters.
No longer a minor under her aunt's guardianship, Khadidra is able to stay in high school thanks to the $846 a month she now receives from her father's Social Security death benefit.
Everything was good at first, and then all of a sudden, here comes Eddie.
15-year-old Eddie Lee Clark is a boy with a reputation that exceeds his years.
He was someone that the neighborhood knew who he was, the girls knew who he was, the adults knew who he was, and the police knew who he was. He had been in trouble numerous times as a juvenile. Of course, those records are still in Georgia as a juvenile, but basic thefts, robberies, those sort of things was what he was suspected in.
I'm not sure how they met. I don't know if it's just from the streets, from family members.
Eddie's rumored to roll with a local street gang.
Rumor has it that he was exposed to assault at a very young age. A lot of illicit activities in and around the home where he lived.
He didn't do like kid stuff. Like he wasn't even, I don't even remember ever seeing him going to school. So I just thought he was older. He would drink, smoke.
This relationship developed pretty quickly. I think probably at first glance, once they realized they liked each other, they probably became quickly committed to one another.
Eddie catches Khadidra's eye because they like to do some of the same things. Just like him, she likes to drink, smoke, hang out. And in many ways, this is the first time that she's had the approval of a man since the death of her father.
Although he lives with his mother only 1 block away, Eddie spends most of his time in the home Khadidra shares with Jessica.
It didn't really seem like Eddie's mother was concerned about what he did because she ended up kicking him out. I don't know what was the reason why. So my sister ended up letting him stay with us, and I told her, no, that's not a good idea.
Don't you have some around to be?
Jessica!
But Eddie stays anyway. Although Khadidra's only known Eddie a few weeks, having him around causes everything else in her life to fall by the wayside.
Oh, damn.
Which Khadidra drops out only 4 months shy of graduation.
Now it was a matter of Eddie was too young, and Khadidra pretty much subsisted on the money from her father. It was the first time a boy really bonded with her to the extent that she lost sight of self, ignored school, ignored family, ignored everything.
The days pass uneventfully for the couple, until Eddie goes too long without checking in with his probation officer, and the police come looking for him.
He had bounced around with his mother, said, yeah, this is where I last saw him, and pointed toward Khadidra's house.
Well, he's actually in love with his probation.
But Eddie isn't at Khadidra's house, and neither is Khadidra. For Khadidra, playing hide and seek from the cops with Eddie may seem like fun and games. but it will lead her down a dangerous path with deadly results.
She didn't die in his sleep, so he just kept stabbing her over and over again. Khadija was a participant in whatever Eddie wanted, and she went along with a smile on her face.
In Cedartown, Georgia, 18-year-old Khadija Cook is hiding out with her 15-year-old boyfriend, Eddie Clark, wanted for violating his probation.
Eddie had a juvenile record. I think his mom reported him running away from home.
With eyes and ears on the street, Eddie gets word that the police are looking for him.
Khadija and Eddie kind of went on the lam for a few days. They were staying in an abandoned home in the same area where they could see the activities, the comings and goings.
The young lovers return to the apartment Khadija shares with her sister once they think the coast is clear.
Which that wasn't the case, and police came and picked him up and sent my sister to jail.
Khadija's done nothing wrong, but she's already lost one man in her life, and she's not going to lose another, so she's going to go along with whatever he says.
The next morning, she is released, under the provision that she can no longer have any unrelated minors in her home.
It wasn't anything she was prosecuted on. It was simply, hey, don't do this again. For harboring this guy, we could lock you up.
Life returns to normal for the Cook sisters for about a week, until Eddie is released from juvenile detention sporting an ankle monitor.
She still hung with Eddie, and that's when I just call it quits. I was like, I can't do it, because I'm not going to go to jail behind him, or I'm not getting my kids taken away.
The police said he's not allowed to be here.
With Eddie, Khadija sees the us versus them mentality by being with him. So when Jessica gives her this ultimatum, it goes exactly the way that one would expect.
You're going to regret this.
4 months after moving in with her sister, Khadija uses her monthly death benefit payment to move into her own place, and quickly blows through the money.
She gets her check, which is $846. Rent is actually $300. And she also had to pay for utilities. She had to pay to cut on water and gas for the first time.
Within 4 days, all $846 of it is gone.
Khadija's playing house, but the reality is that she's never been on her own. She's never had a job. She doesn't even know how to handle money. She's just going through the paces. Eddie's only 15. So really, these are just youngsters playing the role of adults, and they're really not prepared for what it means to be an adult, to be on your own.
This is the last of it.
To make matters worse, Eddie has secretly moved in and has also cut off his ankle monitor, alerting the authorities who are now.
Why? Because
He did not want to go back to court. He did not want to go back to jail.
why she saying like that though?
Eddie did what he wanted to.
Cut off his monitor.
And law enforcement's attempt to keep a constant eye on him. Eddie suggests they go to Mississippi, where he claims to have extended family.
15-year-old's thought process is thinking that, okay, I can go to Mississippi, live with my family, and the police won't bother me there. And Khadija was all for it. They could live happily ever after.
Khadija's mind is wrapped up into this romantic ideal as to what a relationship should be. So when Eddie gives her a plan as to how the two of them can run away, she embraces it. In many ways, subconsciously, it reminds her of her father taking control, so she goes with it.
But with nothing left from the monthly benefit check, the two can't leave town, which makes it even more unusual when Eddie tells Khadija to order some pizza.
We don't have any money, Eddie. She said she didn't understand why, because they didn't have no money.
Khadija believed that he had gone home to his mother's home to get some money from his mother.
But Eddie has something else in mind. Half an hour after Khadija calls in the order, 27-year-old Elizabeth Hutchison arrives with pizza.
The driver was engaged to be married. She had a 4-year-old child. She had taken this job just simply as a way to make a little extra money. Khadija was in the kitchen. First thing she really heard was the doorbell, and then Eddie answering the door and stating to the pizza delivery person, she's in the back.
Where'd you say she was?
And all of a sudden, Khadija hears a scream.
Khadija rushes towards the sound, and what happens next shocks her to her core.
She sees Mr. Clark stabbing and hitting the pizza delivery driver.
Whoa, what a sicko.
Was a pocket knife that he always carried.
Killed her for a fucking free. Oh my God, what a bum.
Sitting around and just picked up.
Ah,
And he proceeded to keep stabbing and stabbing and stabbing.
what the fuck?
We gotta go. Eddie started to leave. She was in a complete state of shock. Her ability to really understand what's going on is pretty much gone at that point. She's sort of in a fight, flight, or freeze mode.
Shit, I bet.
They got away with less than $30.
Oh my God.
After Khadijah and Eddie flee, a Cedartown police officer arrives on the scene after hearing her agonizing screams during a routine traffic stop up the street.
Can I just heard some suspicious activity?
So police show up and see Elizabeth there, through the blood, and they talk to her.
She's saying something.
She gives a description of both Khadijah and Eddie.
It is the last thing Elizabeth Hutchison will ever say.
Chicks right there at the house.
And now Khadijah and Eddie are on the run for a lot more than a parole violation. They're wanted for murder.
The night of the murder, I got a call from the friend that I was staying with. She ended up calling me, and she said, police are down here at your sister's house. They're saying that she killed someone. My heart dropped, and I just dropped to my knees, and I just cried because I said, this can't be happening.
And later, in Grand Prairie, Texas, 26-year-old Desiree Satterwhite falls for the charms of an older man with a violent past.
He has a significant number of war theft, firearms violations, burglary, and aggravated robbery.
And when he returns to his criminal ways, Desiree is more than eager to go along with him.
Charles introduced Desiree to what he used to do and talked about how they could do it together.
In Cedartown, Georgia, teen couple Khadijah Cook and Eddie Clark are on the land after police link them to the murder of a pizza delivery woman.
And it was pretty easy to connect them. Khadijah called from her house. The lease was in her name, and everyone there in the town knew that Eddie and Khadijah were always together.
Everybody started calling me. I was like, do you know where your sister is? I'm like, no. Like, I'm looking for her. Like, I just found out. Like, what's going on? It really just hurt.
Khadijah and Eddie frantically call friends looking for a place to hide out,
Come
but no one
on.
wants to get involved.
Most of their friends had their own stuff going on.
Need some
They
water.
really didn't want the police finding out what they were doing.
With nowhere to go, Khadijah and Eddie spend the night in yet another abandoned house, and then are spotted the next morning a mile from the crime scene. As word of their capture gets out, family and friends are in shock.
I wanted to think the best, well, maybe, she wasn't there. But I was like, no, then if she wasn't there, then how she ended up with Eddie, and why they wanted.
Once in custody, Khadijah and Eddie are separated, and Khadijah pleads ignorance.
Khadijah said that I didn't know what was going on. I just made the phone call to the pizza place. That's all that I really know. She was acting pretty confused, hoping that everything would go away and there would be no other questions asked. But that wasn't the case. She had no idea what they'd done. She had no idea the severity of it. She was inquiring with me about the possibility of a bond, and my comment to her was that, in fact, Georgia still has a death penalty, and this could, in fact, be a death penalty case. She should be concerned with what sort of sentence she could be facing.
Khadijah is in denial. Yes, of course, she called for the pizza delivery, but she didn't rob the person herself. In her mind, she's not guilty of any kind of crime.
Oh, no, you an accessory. That's crazy.
Both charged with aggravated assault, aggravated robbery, and murder.
She ended up pleading to felony murder. She received life.
I ended
Yeah.
up visiting her in jail. She just kept saying, like, how could I be so stupid? Everybody tried to tell me, look what type of situation I'm in.
Although Eddie is a minor, the severity of the crime enables him to be tried, but without the possibility of a death sentence. Eddie also strikes a deal and pleads guilty. At the age of 17, he is sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 50 years.
Oh my God.
Once enamored couple.
He ain't never getting out.
That love that she had for Eddie was lost very quickly as soon as the reality set in that she was going to rot in jail. I believe
Wow.
that in her life, I wish she could set in prison. I think Khadijah Cook was simple with the ways of the world, and I think she had some growing up to do. And unfortunately, it happened way too fast, and now she's not going to prison.
Khadijah is a very young woman, but she spent more time in jail than she actually spent in the relationship with Eddie. So one could imagine that the only thing she's concerned about right now is to how she's going to get through this prison sentence, how she's going to stay safe, how she's going to live her life.
I wish she had never met him. Her life would have turned out totally different.
Deidre Cook sacrificed the unrestricted freedom of adulthood for the love of a teenage boy. In Grand Prairie, Texas, Desiree Satterwhite will turn her back on the people who love her for the chance at happiness with an older man. Desiree grows up in Grand Prairie, Texas, in the perfect home life, with the kind of parents every kid sees on TV and wishes they had in real life.
Whether it was navigating through school, life, teen years, or whatever, she had her parents there for her, giving her support.
Her parents were attentive. Her parents cared about her. Her parents loved her.
Even after, at the age of 14, Desiree gives birth to her first child, and she doesn't know who the father is.
She began
What
associating with young men that perhaps weren't doing what they should have done, and she liked the bad boy. She liked the excitement of it.
Sometimes, influences get the best of people. No matter how hard parents try, children can go the wrong way. We make mistakes. That's what childhood is for.
With her parents willing to take on some of the responsibilities that come with being a teen mom, Desiree graduates high school, but bounces from one dead-end job to the next. At the age of 23, after another failed relationship, she gives birth to her second child.
She was pregnant again. Once again, she was left without a father for her children. And frustrating for her, but luckily for her, she had her parents to help her.
Too much support and too much permissiveness might have the opposite intent. And for someone like Desiree, instead of using it as a springboard towards success and achievement, instead it pushed her more towards complacency.
For a single mother with 2 children to support, a life means a job. That's when a family member mentions an opening for a receptionist at the local welfare office.
It was her mom who introduced her to the possibility of working at the welfare office, and it was a job that her parents could be proud of.
Desiree takes to her job immediately and becomes a welcoming sight to those in need.
Seeing her smiling could make all the difference in the world for them, and I think she realized that.
But after a few months on the job, Desiree's smile hides her feelings of boredom, until the day her routine is broken up by the arrival of 48-year-old Charles Camp, a man down on his luck.
He was handsome, charismatic, charming, confident. He's just having a bump in the road right now.
Desiree is intrigued by the much older, smooth-talking Romeo, whose surface appeal hides a violent and criminal past.
He has a significant number of arrests and convictions for theft, firearms violations, burglary, and aggravated robbery.
And after his most recent prison
It's about down on his
his
luck.
in search of a
He was living with his sister. He had family here. So if he was seeking to leave the Kansas area, this would be an actual place to go.
But once he meets Desiree, instead of a fresh start, he'll find a partner in crime.
She was pumping him up as her Clyde, and he was pumping her up as his Bonnie.
Oh my God. Hilarious.
In Grand Prairie, Texas, 26-year-old Desiree Satterwhite is drawn to handsome stranger, 48-year-old Charles Camp, a man who, unbeknownst to her, has a violent criminal past.
Charles was a career criminal. He committed a string of crimes. He's been in and out of jail all his life.
Desiree came from a very good home. She had a very loving father. So to meet someone like Charles, who's an older man, she sees the best in him right away. She becomes...
Excuse me.
Several visits later, Charles starts looking forward to more than just his welfare checks.
I can't handle any of it. This deal. That narrator, man, she has just got me going for real.
And he was persistent, and that was flattering to her.
Just a few weeks in, the two begin a passionate affair, spending almost all of their time together at his sister's house where he's staying. After seeing Charles for almost a week, Desiree brings him home to meet her parents.
Oh no. She done took this criminal home to meet her parents. It's so hilarious. Gosh, what a nightmare. Oh God.
Really don't like Charles. They see him as a predator. After all, he comes from their generation. He's got a lot more experience than she does, and they know that she's really naive to the ways of the world.
Over the next month, Desiree spends more and more time with Charles, and less time at home.
She still had contact
I
with
do
the
believe I
children,
need to take me some cough
They
medicine.
primarily lived with her grandparents during that period, but
Wow,
mostly
this smoke
she stayed
all
with
day.
Charles and she avoided her parents. It had to be
Singulus,
disheartening for
diende,
Desiree's mom and dad
singulos, dies,
because here
omnibus,
she was so
diabus,
easily swayed
vitae,
and just
name,
running off and
perpetuate,
literally forgetting her children.
Desiree
revocate,
had children when she was
presence,
very young. In fact, when she was just a child herself, Desiree never had that freedom that comes with being a youngster, being a teenager. Now she has that with Charles. But she did have parents who tried to keep her on the right path, the path of responsibility.
All seems well for the couple. Until cutbacks at the welfare office.
If y'all hear me speaking in Latin, I'm not trying to put a spell on y'all.
All of a sudden, she lost her job. They no longer need her services. And here she looks at Charles. What are we going to do?
Desiree's uncertainty is compounded by the fact that Charles has not been able to find employment because of his criminal record.
Charles, like so many others who are released from prison,
mia industria et vertite, mia ad libertatem,
jobs, applications.
adequate,
That's that question, and that question is one
ex
that a lot of
delexit,
employees shy
very
away from, and they
felix
will turn you
tua,
away. And he was turned away.
industria tenebras.
When Desiree's parents learn of their daughter's plight, they try to intervene.
Et non
They're telling her,
positus
come on, get your life
malediction
together. We'll help
has
you.
converted
And
super
that's not what Desiree wanted.
mea fama
If it were a choice between choosing
dignitatis
between
pecuniae
Charles
which
and
curis
the comfort
amore
of her parents' home, she would rather be with Charles.
necessitudinous
Madly in
nulla
love, not
valere
wanting to be a burden on either of their families.
liberasque
The two take
vicissim
up residence in Desiree's
perpetual
car until they can figure something out.
valio
Living in
ready
a car,
et ego
very uncomfortable.
incidendo
it's
et
not only
malice
that we are
whereas
on
constantur
an individual,
non
but we're on
quam
it as a
retardo credo
2 nights later,
Faceri
Charles tells Desiree he thinks he has a solution.
referte amacorum pecunia res feliciter mihi non ego non tantum supersit non vitis omnis daemona vil transirit obliti
I don't think he was ever truly honest with her.
omni studio
Portrays
commenter
himself to Desiree as a
o primere
victim of
mi
injustice
redere
of society.
Kansas
Sort of
urban
like a
Missouri
Robin Hood
est
type who
et
robs from the
ego
rich and gives
non
to the poor,
venere
but all in all, doesn't
restorsum
really want to be involved in
Ice
illegal
today,
activities,
in
but has no
domo,
choice to survive. And
peregrinatio
Desiree loves this man, is
et
enthralled by
vivet
him,
vida
and
mia
trusts
et
him.
ego velocity
Charles
inde
tells Desiree how he
defectum
went
et
about
ego
robbing small
non
business
reversus
and how it'd be a lot
ego
less dangerous to pull one off
nunquam
now
sic
if he had someone to scout the place out prior to his
expelator. Oh, why did that happen?
He's pulling on her hard to get her to say, okay, I'm going to come in with you.
And so perhaps she's willing to do what she has to do in order for him to successfully get through a robbery.
With Desiree on board, there's only one more thing Charles needed: a gun.
Et vivet vida mia et
And she
ego
tells him she knows
velocity
what
inde
he had won.
defectum et ego non reversus ego non quam sic expelator et sissa non sit nuper interim omnis
The
financial
next day, Desiree
proposita
and Charles make a surprise visit to her parents' house.
occurrit
So she knew her
cultivi
mother had a gun.
et sum
And she volunteered her mom's gun
ego
to
sum
be
felix
used
financially
as
secura
they
et
committed their crimes.
libera
Desiree had only
sum
brought Charles to
toi
her parents' house 3 times. The last time
Faceri
she brought him over there,
Liberavit et plene entis vestri sacrificium et nihil in vita mea semper et in hastias receiving QA Lei ego nunc volo manere protected et ego semper quadus ab financial sanitas pravos et vinctus malum sit in sempiternum sit fiat semper.
26-year-old Desiree Satterwhite and her boyfriend, 48-year-old ex-convict Charles Camp, are homeless, jobless, and living in their car in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Thank you, God.
That's when her man tells her he knows how to get some quick cash by hitting small shops.
I absolutely think that there was an attraction to that lifestyle. I think she perceived it as being romantic. She perceived it as being exciting. I think Desiree, in her heart of hearts, was a risk taker. And I think she had a good time with this. And I think that she perceived Charles as being powerful.
Later that afternoon, the duo makes their debut score.
The first location that they went to, that we have evidence of, was a sandwich shop in the city of Fort Worth on Maurice Avenue. It was located in a strip mall.
Desiree goes in and stakes the place out. Talk to the clerk, maybe look around, come back out, tell them how many people were inside.
She's seen that no one there are no customers. And so, he goes into the store, and while he doesn't fire the firearm, he does brandish it and demand all the money.
The clerk hands over the cash and the robbery goes off without a hitch. Desiree and Charles flee with their take, a little over $100. It's barely enough to get them a hotel room for the night.
They weren't living high on the hog at all. They had enough money at the end of the day to get a room and some food. Yes.
You would think that maybe they went out and partied and had a good time. And actually, they took care of business. They wanted to eat, and they paid the car insurance. It was their home. They needed to have it secured, but that money was gone. It wasn't much, so it was gone quickly, and they needed to come up with more. And there you start hatching the plans for more robberies, more victims.
A fantasy the two turn into a reality in and around the greater Dallas-Fort Worth area several more times.
Desiree had an opportunity to make the right decision. She could have gone home to her parents and to her children in a normal life. But instead, she decided to stay there and abet that particular situation. Most likely because it was for her love for Charles, and just as important, the fact that this was so exciting. It brought a new meaning to her life.
As usual, their spoils are only enough for essentials and an occasional hotel room.
And this is the big payoff. This is a reward for all the work that they've done, all the crimes they committed thus far, just to be able to sleep in bed.
Over the next 6 days, Charles and Desiree keep their heists going.
They were spacing them out geographically as they committed more offenses. I'm not positive even that we know all of the offenses they committed.
I think Desiree and Charles believed as long as they kept going to different jurisdictions and doing robberies in different cities, that they could keep hopscotching their way across Texas, and that way they could roam around.
And the more places they rob, the more it becomes equal part necessity and equal part thrill.
You got the idea that they felt invincible and that they were feeding off of one another's energy. Desiree saw this man as her knight in shining armor, and she was his ride or die chick.
Desiree and Charles are caught up in their own world, in their own fantasy, in their own reality. For them, it's day-to-day, robbery by robbery.
Then 11 days into their spree, Desiree and Charles are so desperate for cash, they return to the scene of their first crime, to rob another store a few doors down.
And that turned out to be a mistake for them. It put them in a location where people could compare notes and identify them.
In addition, the new location is also a lot more high-tech than the first one.
That store had a beautiful video surveillance system. So when they left the store, we had wonderful video footage of their faces and Desiree's car.
Desiree and Charles don't know, but their images have made their way across all the local jurisdictions, and a manhunt ensues.
were working together once they determined that there was a pattern here.
And when Desiree and Charles try their luck in Dallas, their luck will finally run out.
When they were stopped by the police, the firearm that was used to commit the offenses was in the car.
She and Charles were in this together. They quickly reached a point of no return.
In Grand Prairie, Texas, Desiree Satterwhite has been enlisted into a life of crime by her ex-con boyfriend, Charles Kennedy. The two are suspected of the armed robberies of 8 businesses in just 11 days. And police from 4 jurisdictions are hot on their heels.
You got the idea that they felt invincible and that they were feeding off of one another's energy. She was supporting him and lifting him up.
A Be on the Lookout is issued, featuring pictures and detailed descriptions of Charles, Desiree, and Desiree's car.
Desiree and Charles were oblivious to the fact that police were putting the pieces together and they were ready to pounce, really, at that point. It was only a matter of time.
So far, they've been able to skirt the law, but one crisp morning 18 miles down the road in Dallas, their luck runs out.
A police officer observed them scoping out businesses in Dallas and saw the vehicle and saw the individuals in the vehicle and realized they were identical to the description that had been given.
As officers move in, Desiree and Charles's gun is in plain sight.
It was right there in the car and was within arm's reach of both defendants when they were stopped. It's very lucky for those police officers that they didn't decide to run or to shoot.
Desiree and Charles are arrested without incident and taken into custody. Under the interrogation spotlight, Desiree covers her own skin.
Initially, she denied responsibility. Then she minimized the situation significantly. For example, she told the police that she'd only known Charles for 2 to 3 weeks, when in fact she'd known him for longer than that.
When investigators tell her she's facing felony charges, Desiree's flabbergasted.
Flabbergasted.
As far as she's concerned, she's
Oh my
just kind of
goodness.
been a passenger along a joyride.
Because
Wow.
she was thinking she did not have any firearms, she did not threaten anyone. All she did was go in and case the place and drive away.
This is what Desiree may have been thinking all along. I'm not the one with the gun. I'm not the one demanding the money. I'm not the one committing the crime. But the fact of the matter is, she was involved in a crime.
Eventually, she started conceding that she had done things that made her a party to the offense, but she attempted to suggest that she didn't know what was going on. When that didn't work, then she tried to suggest that Charles had coerced her or forced her in some fashion. After a period of time, she did concede that she had assisted in the commission of the robberies, and she described her own conduct.
But Charles is not as uncaring toward his love of one month. Knowing Desiree has her whole life ahead of her and children to take care of, he falls on his sword for her and tries to absolve her of any involvement.
Charles painted a picture of Desiree as not being culpable. He made her seem like she was innocent and it was all him.
Charles constantly tried to convince us that she was not involved and that she had no responsibility for it.
But despite Charles's best efforts, prosecutors charged Desiree with the same charge as him: 3 counts of aggravated robbery with a deadly weapon.
Desiree was very much an active part in the commission of this crime. The car was hers, and all the evidence points to the fact that she was the one driving. Then she would go in and make sure that the times were right for an aggravated robbery.
But it's showtime.
Prosecutors offer Desiree a deal, a 16-year sentence if she pleads guilty. She rejects it.
I think that she thought, because of her lack of criminal history, and that she was young and pretty and not very threatening appearing, I think she thought that she could kind of get away with it.
Her parents are crushed. They want Desiree to accept this deal. They want Desiree to be part of their lives and to have a normal life. But once again, she turns her back on them.
Desiree goes on trial a few months later. After an 8-day trial, the jury takes less than 20 minutes to find Desiree guilty on 3 counts of aggravated armed robbery.
Less than 20 minutes.
She is sentenced to 40 years in prison.
Oh, damn, girl. Damn. Oh, that sucks.
He's never gonna get outside of prison long. What it's like.
Charles' past came back to haunt him, and now he's paying the price. Desiree may not have had a past like Charles, but now she's paying the price by not having a future.
Desiree has a lot of lessons to learn, but they're not going to come immediately for her. She's missing a lot of time in her children's lives, and her parents, 40 years, her parents could be gone by the time she gets out. And then her and Charles will never be together again.
Desiree had parents who cared about her. She had a good support system. Didn't have to be this way for her.
In the north side of Houston, Texas, Danielle Hudson and her caregiver grandmother do the best they can to keep the outside world at bay.
It's a rough neighborhood. People there, low income, low education. It's a hard living.
She still had good adult role models who, with little means, attempted to model the way for her.
But Grandma's government checks can only take an insatiable adolescent so far. And despite all of her attempts to keep Danielle on the straight and narrow, by the time she's 19, she's racked up a handful of arrests for stealing.
Danielle wanted for a lot of things, and therefore she was at risk, almost weak enough to fall under the spell of her associates who also wanted a lot.
But a few days in jail and a slap on the wrist from the head of the house doesn't stop her from indulging her wild side. A string of flings with a cute bad boy type gets her more than she bargained for.
Danielle becomes pregnant, but the baby's father, not in the picture, he takes off right away, so she is left at a young age with this child.
It's quite possible that Danielle felt that void of her parents not being there, and therefore was always looking at ways to be able to get those things as far as love that she wasn't able to get when she was younger.
Over the next 2 years, the single mom finds it impossible to move out of her childhood house due to the stains on her criminal record.
Danielle had part-time jobs here and there, but really nothing that was going to be able to sustain her and her son. So she really had a hard time.
Then, on a warm night in spring, the young parent wants a break for reality. And little does she know, she's about to meet the answer to all of her prayers. After leaving her son with her grandmother, she goes out to a friend's gathering, where she's introduced to the hostess's cousin, 21-year-old Chaz Blackshear.
So, I'll let you guys stand it out there.
Chaz was very charming, spoke very well.
He went into, "Hi, I'm charming Chaz Blackshear, and, I'm here to make you happy."
I'm trusting him. Yeah.
I just came back with it.
The friendly hello quickly turns into a long conversation where the two get to know each other.
They were both the same age. They had a lot in common in terms of their backgrounds, in terms of what was absent from their background.
He tells her he's just relocated from Dallas after leaving the military.
He was run out of the Navy. He did not like officers or that kind of thing. He rebelled against authority.
And like Danielle, Chaz admits he struggled to make ends meet and made some mistakes along the way.
So Chaz was very upfront with Danielle from the very beginning. He told her that he had turned to selling drugs to make money.
After getting busted for drug possession, the only open door was his aunt in Houston.
Oh, damn.
By his aunt, the struggling mom's heart goes out to the soft guy.
Oh, Lord.
A combination
What
she
you gonna do?
Danielle saw Chaz as a guy who was trying to do better. He wanted a fresh start.
And when Danielle tells him about the love of her life, he seems excited at the prospect of meeting her little boy. A few days later,
Wow.
she visited how good her new flame is with her son. She's knocked off her feet.
Danielle fell in love with Chaz. He told her that he would help her buy for her, that he would stand by her.
To see Chaz playing with her son in a productive and happy manner was overwhelming for Danielle, because this is something she didn't have in her own home.
Oh, that's so sad. What did you look advantage of that nice lady?
Within a few short months, when the couple can no longer stand to be apart,
Damn.
they borrow enough money from loved ones for the first month's rent on an apartment and become an instant family.
Their families don't have a lot to give to begin with. it. So they gave what they could, and they basically said, "You're on your own now."
The three play house until the couple's high hopes for the future are quickly dashed.
Ah, that's messed up.
So very quickly, their situation
High
is
hopes.
desperate. They are evicted a short time after moving in because they can't pay the rent.
With a heavy heart,
Oh,
the young
God.
man comes back to ground and saved by Chad.
They're homeless now, so they.
Lord have mercy.
That
That was quick.
They're going wherever anyone will take them.
I can't handle any of it.
We're sleeping on sofa beds. People let me know this is not what we bargained for. Okay, what do we do now?
And desperate times call for desperate measures. So Chaz comes up with an idea to mug someone. But there needs to be some assurance that the person has cold, hard cash.
What about cab drivers? They have a right on your name.
What? So he decides to call a cab and rob the driver. And this is a two-person job.
I can't do anything that made me better.
Danielle doesn't like the idea. She was very nervous about committing this kind
Wow,
of
where's
crime.
my
She only had
water?
a petty theft on her record before. She's done nothing involving a gun where someone could potentially get killed.
Chaz told her, if anything happens, I'll take all the blame for it.
Thinking their situation can't get any worse, she was ready to play.
Damn, my throat was dry. I'm gonna make me some cereal too.
She finally had someone in her life.
I'm in
who
a
wanted to
cereal
be with the family,
mood.
and she would go along with whatever he said to do.
She just convinced herself she needed to save her family and she had to provide for her son.
Fall rolls around and the couple is crashing on Chaz's cousin's couch. He tells her it's time to take action. That afternoon, they walk from their temporary home to a gas station where Danielle called for cash.
Chaz convinces Danielle to help because he says the cab company will be less suspicious if a woman calls.
At sundown, their car arrives. They drive 3 miles south until they find a deserted parking lot. After the cab is parked, he demands that his girl switch seats with the driver.
Chad drags the cab driver out, puts him in the back seat. Danielle jumps right into the driver's seat, and off we go.
Turns out he isn't even a real cabbie. A taxi driver who's a friend of his lent him the cab so he can make some money under the table.
He tells her to keep driving while he contemplates what to do with the man, who's still begging for mercy.
He knows too much. He's seen too much. Too many things have occurred from the time he got into this taxi until now.
Chad makes his decision. Suddenly, 2 gunshots ring out and silence the cab driver for good.
Chaz shot him once in the head and once in the chest.
In her mind, it was about Chaz just trying to provide for her, no matter what it took.
She drives 17 miles north to a dead end of a back road in the suburbs. They find a drainage ditch that leads down to a bayou, where it seems nobody ever goes.
Danielle gets out and helps move the body, pulling and dragging the legs while Chaz has the arms. Then Chaz just pushes the body and rolls it down the hill.
Neither one of them speaks as Chaz takes the wheel of the cab, heading back toward Houston's west side. 35 minutes later, they abandon the car in a vacant lot, less than a mile from where they're staying. Still reeling and empty-handed, the pair arrive at their friend's house to crash for the night.
Okay, I got it. Remember?
Danielle was much more concerned about being taken away from her son versus the reality at the moment that someone ended up being killed as part of this robbery. Chaz made her feel that he would be the only one to pay the price if they got caught.
The following day, a city worker doing maintenance on the drainage ditch finds the cab driver's body face down.
Damn.
He calls 911. Police find a passport in his back pocket.
I like that little blurring technique they got. Lord, you see the blood and stuff with just the blur of it.
And unlocked a few hours later.
They start putting the pieces together because Mohammed's friend who lent him the taxi in the first place has reported it stolen.
Investigators turn to the taxi business for help solving this murder.
The cab company records all phone calls that come into their dispatch. As a result, the only details that we have is that a female voice said that she and her boyfriend needed a ride.
So cops think they've got a lead now. They're looking for a woman named Shantae. So she called herself Shantae.
The following evening, unaware that Mohammed's body has been found, the duo feels confident that their secret is buried.
And it won't. It's quick, smooth.
Still hungry for cash, the reckless pair set out on a second robbery attempt of another cab driver. Armed with a gun and a strategy to cover their tracks, Danielle's ready to try again.
What the hell they got some lighter fluid for?
Destroy the evidence. She's now not just a participant, she's now actively engaged in this whole criminal scheme, this whole project.
Wow.
Not just his project, it's their project now. They're in it together.
He told her that he was going to take the blame if they got caught. So this again fed into her rationalization, this defense mechanism to say that it's okay. All right, I'll go along with this.
Danielle calls the same cab company as before, gives them the same fake name.
They gonna do it. What the fuck?
The police didn't know
Wow.
was targeted because he's a cab driver. Dispatch hasn't been warned about this particular female voice.
Hello, could I have a cab to, alright, can I get a name? Something.
Certainly it seemed her critical thinking was gone at this point. She just turned it all over to Chaz. He was the mastermind, and she was acting on pure emotion.
10 minutes later, 50-year-old Blaze Wakanaka picks them up and starts the meeting.
Chaz and Danielle get in the cab. Chaz right away shows the driver his gun and demands that he drive.
Hurry up. They drive half a mile down the road and pull into a parking lot at an office building. Danielle gets into the front seat of the cab because now she is looking for the pouch, and Chaz has walked around to the driver's side.
As the man turns to make an impossible escape, Chaz shoots him 3 times in the back, killing him instantly. Danielle digs into the pouch of money, counting $125 in cash. Now, the merciless couple puts the last step of their greedy plan in motion.
$125. Thank you. Oh God, these people needed to go to prison. Lord have mercy.
He's off to the races.
As the cab
They
catches
killed
fire,
somebody for
they quickly make their getaway
$125.
on foot without looking back. As the sun rises
Wow.
2 hours later, detectives are knee-deep in the first cabbie murder. When they get the call,
That's
the cab driver
crazy.
found dead. Blaze Wakanaka.
Wow.
We didn't know, were we dealing with a serial killer who had this thirst to kill?
When investigators arrive on the scene, they have a field day with the evidence that's surprisingly unaffected by the fire.
The mistake they made was you gotta have oxygen for a fire. But the problem was they closed the doors on the cab, and so it burned itself out before it could burn the cab down.
They found fingerprints inside the cab. They found blood. They found shell casing.
After sending the discoveries to the lab for testing, authorities collect video surveillance from the park.
They need to be on America's Dumbest Criminals.
Danielle gets out of the cab, she
I can't even. Oh
literally
my
walks
God,
by
that is
one of the cameras
insanity.
on the building and looks directly into it.
It shows the shooting. It shows them removing items from the car. And then
Oh God, then they did it.
Now, it's a waiting game to see if the lab results can help them put a name.
They did it in front of a security camera. These people.
Their call records to police once again.
they now have 2 phone calls requesting drivers with the woman giving the name.
Oh
Shantae. So they know
God,
there's a pattern.
no,
Later
just
that day,
stop.
and unaware the police are hot on their trail. They make their purchases at a convenience store with their blood-stained cash. But
Oh my
they're not
God.
in the mood to walk back to their friend's house. So the daring couple called for a
They ain't
ride.
even cleaned the blood off of the money. What the hell is wrong with these people?
Before he put it out to the news. And it's during that cab ride that Chaz starts asking about, is it dangerous? Isn't this a dangerous line of work? Are you afraid of what's going to happen?
It's a lucky day for the cab driver who brings the couple to their friend's house and drives away with his life. While the murderous duo plan their next move, investigators wait for the data that will bring their suspects to the crime.
Oh my God, who is that? Is that
24 hours
her?
later, the lab results are in. The fingerprint analysis reveals a match to Chaz Blackshear.
So because of Chaz's previous criminal record, a lot of his information already in the system. They've got his fingerprints now. They know who he is.
He ready to go back to prison too.
Police used ballistics tests to figure out that the crimes were connected, that the same gun was used in both murders.
Of course they did.
To a .380 automatic handgun. They discovered that the rare model was reported stolen by a man they stayed with 20 days earlier. The report listed that a man named Chaz Blackshear is the one who took it. Houston police used Chaz's cellular GPS to pinpoint his
Oh my God.
cousin's apartment. They find Chad with Danielle by his side. They're brought to the sheriff's office for questioning, where they're placed in separate rooms.
So she was immediately trying to distance herself from Chaz. She said it was important that we know the story, that she wasn't involved.
I can't do it.
Danielle admits to being there, but that she didn't know anyone.
Hey, listen, I had nothing to do with it.
No, that he was going to,
I didn't know anyone to kill her.
Okay. Because of the agreement hasn't made with her, she went into the
No.
other room, taking responsibility, taking the blame for everything that had happened with these murders, so that she would not be taken away from her son.
Chad makes good on his promise. He then confesses to police.
he didn't just discard her. He was going to try to stand by her, ultimately to the point where he wrote out a confession saying that he took all responsibility and that Danielle Hudson had nothing to do with the killings and that he was the one who robbed and murdered the cab drivers.
Mhm.
The police then allow them to be reunited in one room where they hold each other before being escorted to jail. In order to avoid the death penalty, Chad pleads guilty and receives life without parole. But his romantic gesture doesn't save her. The surveillance video is her undoing. Danielle pleads guilty and receives 40 years in prison. At their hearings, they choose silence. Danielle has the next 40 years to think about what she's lost in the name of loyalty.
Damn.
Danielle Hudson gave up a life to watch her son play sports, graduate. She'll be in prison when her grandmother dies. She gave that all up. Why? To stand by her man. The wait is sad.
This was a young woman who only wanted to have love, to have a father figure in her son's life. These are things that she never had growing up, but it ended up being a nightmare for her. And when she woke up, she was left with nothing. Not her son, not her life, not even her freedom.
And only 4 decades behind bars will tell if she'll ever figure out where she made the wrong turn.
I think definitely wrong.
Definitely
Dreaming that what
shit.
she had was a prince who could pull her out of whatever nightmare she was living in. And when she woke up, it was not a dream. It was a life that she probably had not bargained for, but a life that resulted in a castle called prison.
Danielle Hudson lost everything after she teamed up with a man on a deadly mission. On the other side of the country in Detroit, Michigan, Sonia O'Neill is cutthroat when she goes into business with her boyfriend. Born and raised on the east side of the Motor City, Sonia O'Neill grows up on her own in a neighborhood plagued with poverty.
It's a tough city. That neighborhood is called No Man's Land.
Her family was poor. She really didn't have a solid family life or parents that really paid her much attention.
Her conditions at home convince the preteens that sharpening her street sense
Well,
is far more
damn.
important than school.
God, that looks terrible.
She had circumstances that, as a young kid, you may not understand. I don't think she could really even concentrate well enough to do good in school.
Because she never learns to read or write, she falls so far behind in 7th grade that she drops out. Over the next 4 years, she's free to do whatever her adolescent heart desires. When she's not out partying with her friends, she's spending time with the man of the hour, resulting in a new addition to her life.
She had her first kid by the time she was 16.
Having a child would have been terrifying for Sonia. After all, her family wasn't there for her, so certainly they wouldn't be around for their grandchild.
At 16, the new mom leaves home only to find herself becoming more and more dependent on the opposite sex.
Going from man to man, bad relationship after bad relationship. So she really didn't have much direction or goals or anything like that.
By her 25th birthday, she's living off welfare and has 5 more kids with different guys, and none of them pay child support.
She was just struggling to survive and provide for her kids. She was desperate for money.
But when welfare doesn't go very far with a mother of 6, she's on the hunt for a solution.
Sonia knew she had to support herself without falling into the arms of yet another man.
That's when fate steps in. A friend presents her with an opportunity where the desperate mom can make stacks of cash and be home to take care of her kids.
I want you to hurt, you know what you're doing.
A cocaine supplier is looking for partners to move his product on the streets.
I'm just trying to make money for me and my kids.
Sonia knew that dealing drugs was a gamble, but it was a gamble that she was willing to
All the time she spent partying as a teen is now about to pay off.
She knew the neighborhood, she knew who was doing what, so she was able to tap into the people that she knew to build her clientele pretty fast.
After a couple of months of pushing blow, she pulled in more money than she's ever seen, enough to comfortably pay her rent and provide for her 6 kids. Over the next 6 years, she's in and out of prison, while her children are in and out of foster care. And every time she gets her children back, she makes sure she drills an important message to them, not to follow in their mom's footsteps.
I want to go to school and get your education. Yes, I love you.
She wanted her kids to have a better life than she did.
At the age of 33, after her latest stint in the pen, she's ready to round up her clients again, when a wrench is thrown into her plan. She finds out she may have been replaced by another drug dealer, 32-year-old Robert Reed. She prepares to size him up, but when Robert turns on the charm, she buys right into it.
Robert was intrigued by Sonia because she was this strong-willed woman out here dealing drugs on her own. She latched on to him and he latched on to her. If they were both dealing drugs, wow, perfect match.
Robert yields the turf, and within a few weeks, the once rivals turn into an item. And to top off the hot romance, he's completely enamored by her kids. He suggests they join forces in love and in the drug game, since her network is vastly greater than his. After testing the waters, Robert moves in, and the woman of the house is on board.
It's me and you against the world kind of attitude.
When you have a man and woman venture into a relationship, 2 people can buy more than one. 2 people can gain more than one.
5 busy years later, Sonia and Robert have doubled their clientele. They make more money than they need to pay the bills, support her kids through school, and keep a savings of around $15,000 in cash in their safe.
They were in high value rank of their peers, their clients.
Now 22 years old, Sonia's eldest daughter, Katrine, is still living with her mom and pseudo-stepfather while she attends nursing classes. Her boyfriend, 22-year-old DeAndre Witherspoon, is like one of the family.
DeAndre knows that Sonia and Robert are definitely dealing drugs because he's there all the time.
One day after school, he hopes to impress the fearless couple by telling them that while hanging out with an old high school classmate, Ronell Thompson, he witnessed something they might be interested in.
DeAndre saw a bag of cash, probably about $13,000. He saw Ronell put the cash in the basement, and he estimated that there could be upwards of $100,000 hidden in that house. What's this?
They're all leaving, as DeAndre continues to tell them the cash is likely growing and that they could easily get to it.
No security, no safe, and really nobody else there. He's gonna just walk in, walk out with all this money and all this cocaine and easy liquor you'll ever have.
A drug dealer robbing another drug dealer, more than likely, nobody's gonna call the police.
As the duo plies more information out of their informer, a plan is slowly cooked up to move in on the stash. They decide to go in at sundown, and the couple knows better than to head into an unfamiliar house without backup.
Hey, Charlie, get to wherever the home real quick.
They knew they had to have other people with them to do the searching of the basement, to look for the money, and in case there were any other individuals there, someone to hold them individuals at bay.
Sonia calls 2 of their regular crack customers, Charles Moore and Taurus Lonnie, to help them pull off the heist, offering them a cut of the money in return. Within an hour, the muscles of the operation are ready, and Sonia has already made the first move.
Sonia calls Ronell. She wants him to bring over some cocaine. So that lured Ronell over to Sonia's house.
The 3 guys jump to their positions in the doorway as Sonia lets the young dealer in. A second later, they pounce.
He was taken at gunpoint at that time, placed on the floor.
Robert tells him, we're going back to your house and you're going to show us the money, you're going to show us the drugs. And Ronell is like, I don't know what you're talking about there. There's no drugs, there's no money. Give him up! Where's the money at? I don't know. I know where that money's at.
The ringleaders don't believe him. They lead him at gunpoint to the trunk of their car. 15 minutes later, hell is about to surface as they pull into Ronell's driveway, 10 miles across town.
They get Ronell out of the trunk of the car. When they go to the porch, the door opens, the house is full of kids.
But not even a room full of young kids
What
was
the
going to
fuck?
stop Sonia from what she and her boyfriend came for.
What
With
the
information
hell?
that there was drugs and money down in the basement.
The four intruders fan out, holding everyone at gunpoint, ordering them to get on the floor.
Ronell was placed in the chair. They took the duct tape off his mouth so he can answer the questions. Where's the dope? Where's the money? He's explaining to them there is no money in dope here.
But nobody buys his plea.
What the
The conniving
hell?
couple know there is money, and they aren't going to leave without it.
That's crazy.
While Robert stays downstairs, Sonia goes on a search to see if anyone else is in the house. She's blown away to discover yet another person tucked away in a bedroom.
Sonia finds a woman, Devin, she's Ronell's girlfriend. Sonia tells her, get up, you're gonna take us and show us where the money is. She's offering no help, so Sonia takes an iron and hits Devin in the head, knocks her cold out.
Up until this point, Sonia had never been violent, but now she appeared to be mirroring Robert's behavior.
Getting even more agitated, she joins her boyfriend in the kitchen, who's keeping an eye on the dealer and his two littlest cousins. Meanwhile, their helpers have taken the two other young house guests to the basement.
They start tearing up the basement, behind the walls, pulling whatever they could pull out where money could be hidden, or where drugs could be hidden. Had the young men on the floor, kicking them, believing they could force them to tell where the money was.
Things went a little haywire. The money that they expected to find was not there.
After confiscating their phones, they hard-heartedly threaten the two owners, telling them to stay in the basement. 20 minutes into the raid, they make one last attempt to get what they came for.
Robert is telling Ronell, look, this is your last chance. You better tell us where the money is hidden. Where are the drugs? And Ronell still says, I don't know what you're talking about.
Fuming at his response, this isn't the answer Robert is looking for. And nobody is safe until he covers any trace of their presence at the house.
They couldn't just leave, because now people knew who they were. People knew where they lived. There's one man sitting there who could tell everything, Ronell.
So Robert tells Torres to shoot Ronell. Torres takes out a gun, fires it 3 times, and he shoots Ronell in the stomach and in his groin area.
Torres, believing he's just killed their captive, runs out of the house and gets into the car, assuming the crew will follow suit. But unfinished business holds them inside.
See my face, they'll get you.
As Sonia stands in the living room staring down at the two youngest kids, she raises her gun and fires it.
Oh,
The
wow.
rest of the group comes running out of the front door and piles into the car after racing the 15-minute drive to their house. The twosome is furious that they came back with blood on their hands, but most of all, they have nothing to show.
Sonia gave Torres and Charlie $100 each and a little bit of crack cocaine just to keep them quiet.
Faced with the possibility of having witnesses who could identify both her and Robert, she felt that she had to take matters into her own hands by any means necessary to keep that financial empire that was taking care of her kids and her lifestyle.
The couple doesn't sleep, unsure of the fate of those they robbed. At Ronell's house, the sound of Sonia's gunfire still rings like an echo in the ears of few survivors.
Devin, who's been knocked out, she comes to. She goes downstairs and she sees her boyfriend, Ronell, laying on the floor in a pool of blood.
As he struggles to breathe, he tries to signal her to look at something just a few feet away from them.
She goes over to the boys and she sees that they're face down on the floor. They're not moving.
She turns them over and discovers that 13-year-old Orlando and 12-year-old Darren are dead. The other two cousins are nowhere to be found. Horror-stricken, she runs back to Ronell, who she's sure is going to die.
She's cradling Ronell in her arms because she thinks he's about to die. And the other cousins, the older cousins, come up from the basement, and one of them actually calls 911.
Ambulances were to find the type of crime scene only witness to their murder is at death's door.
At that point, Ronell couldn't tell the police anything. He was away on a stretcher.
At the hospital, police wait on the edge of their seats for the nurses to let them in to see Ronell.
Ronell undergoes surgery and he comes to and police are able to question him.
A few hours later, he musters up enough energy to write Sonia's name and cell phone number from his phone.
Police show Ronell mugshots based on descriptions that the two older boys gave to them, plus the information that Ronell provided, and they show him the mugshots and he's able to pick out Charlie, Torres, Sonia, and Robert.
12 hours after the murders, Taurus Lyon and Charlie Moore are arrested without incident at their homes. Simultaneously, another police team hightails it over to the house of the mastermind, where they are each arrested. In custody, they each maintain their innocence and think there's still a chance they'll be let go, until they find out about the key witness they left for dead.
She was advised that Ronell was one of the witnesses that sees her shoot both the children.
With witness accounts of the night, Sonia is arrested and goes to trial for the murder of the two children.
Ronell testifies during the trial that it was Sonia, Robert, Torres, and Charlie who kidnapped him, took him over to the house with the intent to rob it. And he also testifies that it was Sonia who shot the two younger cousins.
There are few dry eyes in the room, but the defendants remain unflinchingly calm as the evidence stands heavy against them.
During the whole course of the trial, Robert never testified against Sonia. Sonia never testified against Robert. They remained true to each other to the very, very end.
After Ronell's heart-wrenching account of the night, the jury finds Sonia O'Neill guilty of first-degree murder, and she's sentenced to life in prison. Even after all the evidence at the trial, she maintains the same story until the very end, that someone other than her or her crew must have shot the kids.
She never denied that she did something terribly wrong. She only denied and still denies that she killed them. And I know from talking to her how horrified and upset she was over the fact that those two children were killed.
Robert Reed is also sentenced to life in prison for felony murder. For their roles, Taurus Lyon receives 50 years, and Charlie Moore is 25. The man who hatched the plan, DeAndre Witherspoon, pleads guilty to second-degree murder. He receives 50 years in prison.
Damn. That's crazy.
Orlando, Florida, single mother Angel Glenn does whatever it takes to support her toddler. She was a stripper in Nymphant Dover. But when she hooks up with a bad boy, Angel crosses over from a world of seduction into a life of crime.